In the Sinaloa Cartel, you take each day as it comes, knowing that every day and every minute could be your last. And if you want to leave the job, there are only two ways out: in a jail cell or in a casket. This is the dark and disturbing life that the Sinaloa Cartel members lead. The lookouts. Unless you have family ties with the Sinaloa Cartel, your first job for them will be to act as a lookout, or halcon, which translates to a hawk. This will involve you either standing in the same spot or routinely driving around certain areas. Your job is to keep an eye out for the military, police, rival cartels, and anything suspicious. This seems like a relatively safe position, but you certainly don't want to let your boss down. And if their enemies cannot find the more senior cartel members, they might go for you instead.
And there's a story about soldiers taking them up in a helicopter in a Black Hawk and throwing them out and saying, "You're a hawk, let's see if you can fly."
And these entry-level lookouts do not lead a very glamorous lifestyle associated with the cartel. As a report for El País put it, there are hardly any shootouts or action scenes. There are no big mansions, luxury cars, or narco corridor ballads. What there is a lot of grey-looking suburbs, unfinished brick houses, concrete floors, and cheap clothes. These lookouts put their life on the line for the cartel, but only make a measly $100 a week. However, the alternative for many is to work in the city's sweatshops, which only pay $30 a week. As you can imagine, most cartel members are simply products of their environment. The new starters for this job will receive a burner phone and some binoculars, and when they see someone suspicious, they need to alert the cartel immediately. And on their first day, a police car will inevitably pull up. What the lookout doesn't know is that the police officer is not looking for the cartel, but was actually sent by the cartel. As this former member El Ivan explains,
te dicen vive aquí, pero a la vez mandan al policía ahí para que te lleguen, te investiguen. Si no hablas, como que es un paso más de confianza, ¿no?
in fact, if the police have been paid off, they are the least of your concern. YouTuber Johnny Mitchell spent some time with the cartel when police were outside their building. He was astonished at how calm and cool everyone was about the situation.
Yeah, their odds of this place getting raided is about the odds of it snowing. You know, here, it's not gonna happen.
In these early days as a lookout, you realize that nothing is written down, and you do not need to bring a pad and paper. There are no emails you'll be sending to your colleagues, and everything is done through verbal communication. It is important to leave no traces for the police to use as evidence, and if you ever get caught, they will have little no evidence to use against you either. If that wasn't enough, there are code words. One of El Chapo's ex-pilots testified at his trial and said, "We have code for everything." Guzman would say, "Organize a party," and that meant get ready to land planes. Shirts meant cocaine, girls meant planes, documents meant money. Once trust is built and you do a good job, you may expect a promotion. After about a year of working as a lookout, you can expect to move higher up. So congratulations, you've just earned yourself a promotion. This brings us onto our next role, the dealers. After proving that they can trust you, you might be given a sales position, which will involve you selling drugs on the street. And given that the lookouts were so poorly paid, you would expect that this is when you would get a hefty pay rise. Well, not exactly. You can expect your pay packet to go to $150 a week. As a dealer, there is the golden rule that you don't get high off your own supply. If you're caught taking drugs, you are deemed as less trustworthy, and they will likely beat you up, or much worse. And it is an incredibly risky job. Like a lookout, you are also one of the most visible members of the cartel, and the easiest for their enemies to harm. OG Shadow is a YouTuber and former member of the Sinaloa Cartel. On the Sean Atwood podcast, he said,
If they want to hurt people, sometimes they usually go for the people selling dope because they're the most visible, the most out there, and the easiest to get. You know, they're on this corner in this house. So they're usually the first people to be targeted if there is enemy movement.
And as I touched on earlier, the Sinaloa Cartel will have local police paid off, but not all the time. Sometimes there is a changeover period where the local police have not been paid by the cartel and have no incentive to turn a blind eye to your criminal activity.
Usually the government's paid off, right? But you better hope your boss paid him off, because if 1 week he decided not to, you're the one who's going to pay the price.
People who really risk their lives day in and day out are the hitmen, or sicarios. The sicarios. To be a sicario, you need to be willing to kill anyone, even your best friend. In the Vice documentary, How to Be a Hitman for the Cartel, they visit a shrine to one of their childhood friends, who was killed by the very cartel they work for.
Y lo citaron en una junta y ahí mismo en la junta que lo citaron ya personas muy poderosas y ahí lo mataron. ¿Algún error hizo?
To become a sicario, you are first given extensive training. You are shown how to use a gun and protect yourself. It is treated like an army, and you are given military training. One of the things you would be surprised to learn about the Sinaloa Cartel is life can sometimes be, well, a bit dull. In the documentary Los Plebes, we see the rather mundane side of working on one of the world's most deadly cartels. The soldier it follows is playing a video game and taking the dog out for a walk. However, he always has his eye on the phone. Whenever you work for the cartel, you are on call 24/7, and at any moment, you could be asked on a mission. As a hitman, you need need to be around and ready to attack at any minute. You might not have anything to do for 3 or 4 days. You might be working around the clock too. But whether you spend the month twiddling your thumbs or fighting off an entire cartel, you are still paid a measly $600 a week. So the people working on these incredibly risky endeavors are simply putting food on the table. Geralt Brun, who made the documentary Sinaloa Foot Soldier, inside a Mexican narco militia, got to follow a Sinaloa soldier group named La Vagancia onto the battlefield. Whenever he went to the bathroom, he had the sneaky suspicion that he was going to get shot in the back of the head. The soldiers, on the whole, live a life of fear. They talk about the amazing adrenaline rush during battle, but you can also receive an adrenaline rush that brings you down too.
Pues la adrenalina que se siente, pues te sienta bien, en veces mal. Todo depende del estado del ánimo que te encuentres, la verdad.
Apparently, you get used to it, but it's almost irrelevant how these soldiers feel because they are trapped in this job. He added, sometimes you think about leaving this job too many times. I do feel my feelings have not disappeared, nor do I have a heart of stone. What I am living is normal. It's work. I don't consider myself a bad person. When the working day is done, it's highly unlikely that you can just go back to your home and switch off. If you're engaged in a battle or under threat, sometimes your home isn't safe enough to go back to. You basically need to live outdoors, as OG Shadow explains.
Most of the time, you won't be in some glamorous spot or some high profile place. You'll be in somewhere like this. Probably hiding out in a cave or in the desert because the government or your enemies want to find you.
In this environment, there will be no air conditioning, no running water, and probably 120-degree heat. OG Shadow compares it to being a cowboy in the Wild West or being in the Taliban during the War on Terror. If you need to pass the day, you can play some cards and maybe smoke some cigarettes. Or in this case, nothing helps keep your mind off a drug war like a good old-fashioned game of Scrabble. During this stay, you will mainly be eating canned food, or in this case, a delicious bucket of cow ribs. If you're lucky, you can get someone you trust to bring you takeout. However, this only brings risk to your crew, so this is not the norm. You can't smoke cigarettes at night as this gives away your location. Alcohol is permitted too, maybe some weed, but you're not allowed any hard drugs. You don't get high off your own supply. But don't expect to get any sleep. Out in the desert are scorpions, and these will crawl on you all night. But even more dangerous than scorpions are your own cartel members. In this clip, you can see that the cartel member simply sleeps beside his AK-47. It becomes a habit to simply sleep next to a gun, because these soldiers know only too well what it's like to be found unarmed. The Sinaloa Cartel also does not like loose ends. If you kill someone, they might prevent any evidence that this crime happened by killing you too. And while some adrenaline junkies might find some romance in living out in the wild, you're not only putting yourself in danger, but also your family.
You're also going to spend a lot of time away from your family because of the things you're doing will bring heat upon them.
And a lot of the time, there will be some mundane task you'll be asked to do. If you're hiding out on a ranch, you might be asked to work on the ranch for your boss. For La Vagancia, one of them speaks about just how trying these operations can be.
Lo más que llegué a caminar fueron 5 días. 5 días para poder llegar a pegar un golpe por el puro monte, por el puro cerro.
When you are planning a hit, you need to be incredibly patient and calm. Sometimes a hit on another gang member or an entire gang can take a month of planning and preparation. And because of the unsanitary conditions that they live in, the disease is rampant.
Enfermedades, no hombre. En eran los nacidos.
You'll get rashes of, you're out all day in 100-degree weather, you'll start getting sweat rashes that don't go away, that just your skin will peel off.
And because of the cold conditions, they regularly get the flu too. As a cartel member, you can't simply call in sick and go see the doctor, so your health kind of goes on the back burner. And sometimes your health conditions never get looked at and become permanent. As well as your physical health, your mental health is severely at risk too. We spoke about the adrenaline rushes and its highs and lows. There's also the constant state of fear, the constant feeling that you could be taken away. In an interview with a live hitman for the cartel, OG Shadow explains that
He has stress, but like he's gotten used to it. I can tell what he's saying. Like it's the daily normal stress, but that stress for like me or you would probably be something that would give us like a nervous breakdown.
When Geralt Brun was traveling with a cartel, he compared it to swimming in the ocean with no access to the shore. At any moment, you could get swept away by a current or attacked by a shark. You are forever at the mercy of something much more powerful and deadly than yourself. And of course, there are the people you have killed. For many cartel members, the most brutal thing is when there are innocent people involved, or cartel family members get embroiled in the violence. Interviewing another hitman, OG Shadow said,
He said the most brutal thing is when they make entry to the houses lots of times, because there could be family or other people there in the house. You never know what you're walking into, and a lot of times it's a shit show and innocent people lose their lives.
And sometimes the sheer viciousness of the violence is something that is difficult to erase from your mind.
He said off the top, what first comes to his mind, is the smell of burning cars, watching them burn, sometimes with people in them. You know, it's a lot worse than what you see on the TV. Usually people get burned alive. Like if the car gets lit on fire and they're in it, they'll go throw some extra gasoline on to make sure they turn out crispy.
It's highly likely that a large portion of these cartel members suffer from some sort of PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder. In the US, they found that 30% of Vietnam War veterans had this condition from being regularly exposed to brutal violence. But I can't imagine the cartel is letting its soldiers speak to a therapist every week. The moral code. But despite the never-ending violence and the obscene levels of inhumanity, the Sinaloa Cartel has a moral code, and while out at work, this is something you need to respect. When they are asked to kill someone, it is usually someone involved in the drug trade and someone who has chosen this life. Once you have chosen this life, then you open yourself up to the wrath of the cartel, as this hitman told the BBC.
It can be anyone, says the boss, about their targets. A traitor, a snitch, a thief, someone who hasn't paid the cartel.
There are some house rules when working at the Sinaloa Cartel. Civilians, particularly women and children, are out of bounds. Geralt Brun told El País, all of them are going to tell you that they only kill their enemies, not innocent people. They have a narrative of good versus bad. They, the enemies, are the bad guys, and we are the good guys. A big no-no is to harm tourists. In fact, if the cartels see someone harming tourists, it's likely that they will step in and protect them. This will draw attention not only from the Mexican press, but news outlets from across the world.
Where we are in Sinaloa, they protect the tourists. In fact, if they find someone stealing people's bags or their cell phones or robbing tourists, the cartel will go kidnap that person, maybe kill them, maybe torture them, but they're the one who kind of keeps the order and protects the.
When YouTuber Johnny Mitchell was in Sinaloa, he could not believe how peaceful the place felt.
I was saying, like, this feels like such an insular world, and it's safer than probably one of the safest cities in Mexico. Yeah. In terms of like there's not a lot of homeless people. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of street crime. Everybody stays in line.
Even when it comes to the more gruesome side of things like kidnapping and torture, many just feel like this is part of the job. An anonymous member called El Gordo spoke with Small Wars Journal. Speaking about torture, he said, it's an easy way to know if someone did something or not. And when pushed about whether he has any guilt or remorse, he said, I do not feel like a judge, but we are a necessary evil, and I don't feel guilty because we only do it with people that deserve it. But rule number one is that you always follow your boss, no matter what. At the end of the day, you are a soldier, and soldiers follow orders. If they tell you to kill someone, you never question why, you just do it. If they tell you to kill one of your friends, you do it without question. In fact, a lot of the murders happen within cartels, and killing one of your work buddies is just part of the job. But this is just one side of the cartel. In fact, the main aim is to get drugs from the Mexican border and into the US. And to get this done, they need a few brave souls to make this journey. The next role in the cartel we're going to look at are the smugglers. The smugglers. For the people who smuggle drugs across the border, their lives can be incredibly varied. For John Charles Ward, his day started just before dawn. He would fly a single-engine plane full of cocaine and drive it from coast to coast, from California to Pennsylvania. When asked why the cocaine was transported by air, his response was simple. There are no curbs in the sky, Ward said. There's no place for anybody to pull you over. Similarly, El Gordo testified at El Chapo's trial that he used to fly kilos of cocaine from Colombia to Mexico and land at runways in rural areas known as clandestine landing strips, where they would go unnoticed. But not all smuggling operations are as glamorous. Spanish documentarian David Beriain followed smugglers and came across a woman who flew from Culiacan to Los Angeles, and the cocaine is smuggled through the least likely place that security will ever search, private parts. For transporting $50,000 worth of heroin, she gets $4,000 for each successful delivery. Beriain also followed a smuggler who brought his cocaine across the border in his car. This involves lifting up the seats and hiding them underneath. He also needs to fumigate the interior so sniffer dogs will not pick up the scent. The smuggler's biggest concern was not getting stopped by the police, but losing the cocaine. You cannot lose it, the smuggler says simply. My best friend was robbed before crossing. He ended badly. The cartel killed him. Yes, he had the worst kind of death. Tortured, burned, shot. The smuggler took $700,000 across the border and was given $6,500 as a reward. But this was only half the job he needed to do. Once he was in the US, he needed to pick up some supplies. In Mexico, guns are illegal, so the Sinaloa Cartel gets 90% of its weapons from the good old US of A. Drugs go up, Beriain says, guns come down. But before the drugs are even shipped, someone needs to cook up the drugs for them. Possibly the easiest and safest job in the Sinaloa Cartel is the people working in the labs. The cook. One of the biggest cash cows in the Sinaloa Cartel is fentanyl, an extremely dangerous drug that is typically used in hospitals for pain relief. However, it is used as a recreational drug and is incredibly dangerous. What's more, you can disguise it as a regular pill like aspirin, and it's almost impossible to tell the difference. This substance does not appear in nature, so the chefs need to cook it up. The Wall Street Journal spoke to one of these chefs and showed an array of barrels and toxic substances. These chemicals are imported from China, and once all of the ingredients are in place, the chef follows a simple formula to cook up the fentanyl. He runs this lab and makes $2,500 a week while wearing a hazmat suit, dark glasses, and a mask. He works 6 days a week and makes hundreds of thousands of doses. The crude labs are made inexpensively. They can be made up and torn down very quickly, and it's unlikely that he is permanently at the same spot. While drugs like heroin and marijuana need to be grown, the fact that fentanyl can be created in a lab means he can do this work year-round. A cook named Pedro spoke to PBS. He was asked whether he is concerned about the damage and devastation this drug is having on communities. In 2018, fentanyl accounted for nearly half of the 67,367 drug overdose deaths in the US. His response was, well, it is something that the one who consumes decides on his own. Drugs are bad and addictive. Consumers are aware that the effect doesn't last long, but they cannot go without it. Although they know that it is wrong, it is addictive. Another cook justifies it by saying that a lot of fentanyl deaths are caused by people introducing it to other drugs. Look, it has been known that there are many problems in the US. People are dying. What happens is that people take our product and they put more stuff into it. Then they modify it. Our formula does not kill, but if you change the product, then there can be a big problem. The chefs probably have it pretty easy in comparison to the others. And last but not least, we'll take a look at the kingpins, the people who run the entire show. The kingpin. Most drug lords will live in a huge mansion and are far removed from the violence their gangs inflict upon the world. It is rumored that most of them live in Mexico City, which is considered by a lot of cartels as neutral territory. The New York Times talks about the urban legends of toilets made of gold, mounds of cocaine or cash lying around, and furniture of throne-like proportions. While the reality was that most of the homes I visited were hardly palaces. Many were entirely average and darkly utilitarian. The cartel's former leader, El Chapo, was completely unapologetic about his wealth. He bought his own zoo where big cats could roam, had a $10 million beach house, and traveled to Switzerland for anti-aging treatment. He had houses at every single beach, said Martinez, formerly a close friend and top assistant. He had ranches in every single state. But El Chapo might be an exception. El Mayo and other leaders are not known for brandishing their wealth in the same way. Their key aim is to draw little attention to themselves and keep making money. And as a 73-year-old man with diabetes, his partying days are probably over. For a drug lord in the Sinaloa Cartel, they will spend little time out in the open, and their daily life is spent discussing the business and making the big calls. The Sinaloa Cartel is often compared to major corporations like Walmart or McDonald's. They are run by separate franchises or plazas, so the overall leader is not necessarily needed in the day-to-day workings. But what someone like El Mayo does do on a day-to-day basis is something the Mexican government, DEA, CIA, and countless others have been trying to find out for decades. Ultimately, from the lookouts to the grand leader, they all have one or two things in common. Despite the depths of evil that we sometimes associate with the Sinaloa Cartel, they all seem to have some sort of moral code and also find justifications for their actions. They need something which tells them they are not a bad person. So when they rest their heads late at night, they will be able to fall asleep. But what most of them have in common is an everlasting fear. During every waking second of every hour of every day, something can happen which can get you killed. From the simple soldiers going to sleep with guns by their heads to the cartel leaders with armies of security surrounding their house, they are all denied the freedom of feeling safe. Every day and every minute could be their last. Thank you for watching. Make sure to click on the videos in front of you for more.